Hey guys, welcome to Mic It Up. The mattress industry's return policies have changed dramatically over the past 5 years or so. We think they need to be rethought again. We'll tell you why in today's episode. Stick around.
Welcome to Mic It Up with GoodBed.com's Jeff Cassidy.
So when that's the case, it becomes harder just psychologically to make a change.
And Mike Magnuson.
If you're doing those things, you can be competitive long term.
Just when you thought these number-crunching data lovers couldn't get any nerdier, they started a podcast.
And I know this is pretty controversial, but this is why we're having a podcast, right?
But if you want to be smart about how the mattress shopping journey is changing and what retailers and manufacturers should be doing about it, well then, man, have you ever found your people? Because right now, it's time to mic it up.
You make these things outside?
Well, yeah. So I like to make stuff in general. When it involves a power tool, I have to do it outside because it generates sawdust, or in this case, it will generate PVC pipe dust. So I can't do it. I can't do it in the loft. So I do it on the roof, but power tools in the rain is generally not a good idea.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
So
cool.
Still with the cardboard boxes for the laptop stand at the moment.
Yeah, that's season one. That's season one of the Mic It Up podcast, you know? Making it happen whatever way we can do it.
Yeah.
So let's get into today's topic, because this is kind of a personal pet peeve or pet topic for both of us. I'd say we both care a lot about the environment, but we also care a lot about consumers, and we care a lot about the businesses in this industry and their financial health. And this issue kind of ties into all of those. And so it's become something that we talk about a fair amount, and we think about. And so we're going to break this into two episodes in our ever failing effort to keep this content snack-sized. But we're going to talk about today kind of the case for change, why we think that there needs to be some change, because it feels like we're on a path that's not altogether sustainable as it relates to the volume of returns. So we're going to talk about that today. But before we get into that, I think we want to just set the stage by talking a little bit about how we got here. Just very briefly, remind everybody that pre-Casper, in the quote BC era, 1 or 2 years BC, we didn't really have a whole lot of returns in this industry. Return policies often included things like restocking fees and other kind of penalties that basically prevented people from wanting to make a return. There was probably good reason for why those return policies were written that way, because the returns, obviously, when mattresses get returned, typically they have to go get picked up. Obviously, if they're going to be resold, if they can be resold at all, I should say, they have to be, refurbished or treated in some way, and even then they're going to get marked down significantly. And so there was a lot baked into kind of hopefully minimizing the amount of returns, and that showed up in the overall number of returns. And some retailers didn't even accept returns at all. Although that's probably still true to a degree, that there are some retailers that don't accept returns. But I think that the number of retailers in that category has fallen precipitously in the last 5 years, I'm guessing. And so that's kind of, and then Casper comes in, and again, in that BC era, not a lot of business being transacted online, and in large part that has to do with the fact that people can't try the product before they buy it. And so one of the things that Casper, one of the sort of business model innovation elements that Casper introduces is the idea that you can return the mattress at no cost. You can try it for up to 100 days. So they come in there. That's meant to address this concern with having to buy the mattress without trying it, and it's a very effective tool. In fact, Casper in its early days finds it so effective that they basically lead with it in their marketing. If you remember Casper's early marketing from that 2014, 2015 timeframe, it was like if they had 6 words to tell you about Casper, 2 of them are going to be about the return policy or something,
Yeah, because the other 4 were perfect mattress for everyone.
Yeah, it was like perfect mattress for everyone. Try it free. or tried free for 100 days. I mean, that's like less than 10 words, half of which are about the return policy. I mean, they really, really led with it. And that's because it was effective. They found that it was effective. And I think at some point, maybe after a year or so, I remember of their evolution, I remember that they reached a point where they kind of found it to be still effective, but they'd started to see the problematic elements of it, where the returns, by having led with it so prominently, people were taking advantage of it too often, and it was becoming an unsustainable economic. So they were trying to come up with ways to prevent returns once people had it, and that wasn't working enough. So then they started backing off of it in their marketing. They obviously didn't change the policy, but they just decided to put other things more front and center in the marketing message. And of course, other people, in those early days, it was kind of like what Casper did, everyone else followed suit. That was sort of the story. But nonetheless, that idea of free returns has persisted. I mean, that still remains an integral part of the online mattress shopping kind of expectation that has been set. It's really the ante. I don't know that today there's any other model that's out there in use in any prominence in the online space.
Right. At this point, it's just cost of doing business. Nobody's
Correct.
going to buy. Nobody's going to buy if you don't have a policy like that.
And we actually continue, if anything, we continue to see people upping the ante on that. Moving to 365-day trials instead of 100-day.
Or in the beginning, it was 101 days.
No, that's
Remember
true.
that?
Yeah, that was 120.
101. That one.
And then
more
it was
day.
180, and then the people went to the 365. And truthfully, it doesn't really matter all that much when you're offering a mattress, because at this point, these guys oftentimes are not even going and bothering and picking it up. They're not doing anything to recoup that cost. So you might as well let people keep it longer if that's going to make more people comfortable buying it. And as long as you don't feel like people are serially abusing these things. But that does kind of lead into some of the concerns, because what we've seen is that there is some abuse, and some of it is flagrant. I was quoted in that Wall Street Journal article that I kind of was worried about that article even being written. I remember I had some concerns as should you really be putting this idea in people's head? But
that I was going to plant the seed for more people to abuse the system.
The article, the premise of the article was that people are gaming the system such that they're able to just get a free mattress by just riding this wave of one return trial after another, and then just continually serially returning these things. And she hadn't found actually a lot of cases of it. That was the other thing. I was trying to explain it wasn't super prevalent at that point, but
right.
She had found enough.
It was basically one guy in New York, right?
Yeah, she had like one guy who was able to that she could quote. I think maybe two, or she had one person who had done it, and then one person who thought about doing it, I think, was what she had.
Yeah, but she was targeting the serial abuser, like the lifetime free renter of a mattress, as opposed to what we're going to talk about today.
And that really is, I think, thankfully has been a rather isolated problem. And even in spite of that article being out there and perhaps turning people onto that concept, but that thankfully, that remains a pretty isolated problem, and people, by the way, other people who commented in that article were pretty critical of that. I mean, actually, the commenters on the article, I think that's who it was. It wasn't so much the people quoted in the article; it was the people who commented on the article were super critical of the person who was written almost as like the hero of the story, who was this guy who had pulled this off successfully for a couple of years, and he was kind of a little bit glamorized in this story, I kind of felt, and people in the comments were not having it. They were like, that's a terrible thing for a human being to do. It's terrible to the businesses, it's terrible to the environment, it's terrible to, I mean, they were not having it. No one was celebrating this guy.
Which is great.
Which is awesome, yeah. That was humans showing their good sides there. So, but there's another form of abuse that's much, much more common, and it's people who think they have good intentions and they think they're using these return policies as they should be used. Clearly, that guy knew he wasn't using the return policies as they were supposed to be used. But people who are trying to decide and pick the right one, they earnestly believe that they're using them as they should. And sometimes they get so carried away, they'll tell us, okay, like I bought 4 so that I'm going to try them all and then I'm going to pick the one I want. And like it's shopping for shoes on Zappos. And that is just atrocious. And the thing is, people don't necessarily realize, and this is what we explain to them, whenever a situation like that comes up on our YouTube channel or on our website, I take it as a very clear opportunity to educate anyone reading that is a terrible thing to do. Because I explain that the system right now is saturated. See, these consumers are led to believe that the mattress that they don't want, that they return, will be donated. So they almost think of themselves as like, oh, I'm like a mattress philanthropist. I'm out there like creating new mattresses for people in need here with my, shopping here. And that's just not the case. The system is pretty much saturated. There's already like a lot of friction around who can accept mattresses once they've been opened. In some states, no one can. And in many states, there's a lot of regulations around that. And even once you get beyond that, there's just the people who can accept them. They've been getting so many over these last few years. They're flush. They don't need more. And so that's the reality of where we are, is that the system is saturated. People don't understand that. And they don't understand that the next implication of that is that at best a mattress gets recycled. But more likely than that even, it's a landfill situation or something like that. So
yeah, I was talking with one of our local Discovery partner retailers, and he brought up an interesting point, which is because of COVID, there might be some opportunity. They're seeing some local organizations and nonprofits popping up that are taking mattresses again. So that's good.
Yeah.
So there might be opportunities for some of those to come in, but that will just be a temporary blip. I mean, the volume of returns is so big that it will quickly outpace whatever new opportunities to help COVID created. It will quickly
right. And then, of course,
overflow that.
As the online channel continues to gain share, the volume of returns being created continues to go up as well. So by the way, what is the kind of volume of returns we're talking about? I mean, I actually haven't done the math in terms of like the absolute number, but we have done some math to pencil out percentages of like what are the return rates for these online players. When Casper went public in their S1, there was a lot of data about this that was available for the first time, and I parsed through it, and it wasn't a number that they provide. However, from the data that they do provide, we were able to put some parameters around it, like an upper bound and a lower bound, and come up with kind of a comfort zone where we felt like the right number probably lives. And we thought that number for Casper was in the 12 to 14% range at that time. That was about a year ago when they went public that we made that estimation. So I still think that was about the right number for Casper at that time. We've heard from people who know these things or are in a position to know that some people are as high as 20%. Or at least for periods of time. I don't know how sustainable that is, but we've certainly heard that from multiple sources, that's kind of an upper bound that's been out there. And we know for a fact that the people who have, say, a 5% return rate, which, by the way, by historical standards, going back to that quote-unquote BC era that I was talking about before Casper, that would have been off the charts, 5% return rates in the 2013 timeframe. But today, that's if you're an online mattress retailer, that's so good that you're bragging about it in your marketing.
Right. Well, just recently, Resident took in a bunch of funding. There was an article, I think, in Forbes, and one of the things they touted, one of the founders touted, was part of getting their effort to get profitable was they've reduced their returns to an industry-leading below 10%. So
Right.
that was, at the time that we're recording this right now, I think that was just a week or so ago.
Right. So below 10%, I mean, that means probably high single digits.
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
9.95.
right. Well, I don't, and I don't know that that is really necessarily industry leading, but it's hard to know because these aren't public numbers. But certainly we do know that if you're in the single digits, that is bragging territory. We've seen that consistently. Anyone who has told us, yeah, we're at 8%, we're at 9%, they're proud of that number. So that just tells me, I think, that where we calculated Casper to be in that sort of low teens, that's probably about normal for where these online return rates are. And so that's pretty high. And let's talk about some of the costs of that. First of all, it's not great for consumers from the standpoint of the hassle of going through a return, right? Like, so if that many consumers are having to experience a return as part of their purchase journey, that's not ideal, right? Second of all, it's bad for the environment because we talked about the fact that a lot of these are gonna just inevitably end up in landfills, and it's also it's obviously bad for the industry because the frustration and hassle that consumers experience as part of this gets baked into their impression of the experience and of the industry, and obviously the costs have to be borne by the companies. Now, those costs are oftentimes passed back to the consumer in the form of higher prices. So that then creates another reason why it's also bad for consumers. So it's just kind of not good. There's really no good in this, except for the fact that it does grease the wheels to get people comfortable making the purchase. So that part is good.
Or if you're FedEx.
It's great for FedEx. That's true. It is great for. Although I'm not sure any FedEx driver would say it's great. I think those guys pretty much hate the mattress industry, from what I can tell.
They like cheap foam ones. But they don't. They don't like.
I will tell you that they particularly hate being on the route that serves me, because we get so many mattresses, and in fact, there's even been times where just we get other people's mattresses because they see a mattress in their truck and they just assume it's for me, and they just put it in front of my garage.
I'm sure Rachel really likes that.
She loves it. She's
about as much as your microphone in the office there.
There's so much that she loves about this business. It's just where to even begin. But
I'm surprised you're still married. Bless her heart.
Yeah, she's been a trooper.
She hasn't cut you loose yet. So
she's been a trooper. So so the bottom line is this is not good. But in terms of the case for change, I mean, you have to consider that, again, all of these negatives I just outlined are offset by the fact that there's a real business rationale for it, which is that it helps, it created the industry in a sense. Like, there's no way, I don't think, that if you took free returns out of Casper's value proposition, that the online mattress and all of the other Casper followers, if you took that out of the value proposition, I don't see how the online mattress industry ever takes hold the way it did. So it obviously was critical and remains critical to a large degree, but at the same time, it's gotten out of hand. And I do think that, so in terms of the case for change, my perspective is that given the fact that end of life for mattresses is already a problem, like what to do with mattresses that are at the end of their life. That's already a problem. The Mattress Recycling Council has been working on this, trying to get more recycling programs, trying to help connect consumers with recycling centers. But even that is challenged, right? Like there's only 3 states that mandate it. They're the ones that have the highest recycling capacity. Other states are going to be much lower capacity to even handle returns. Or recycling, I should say. Getting mattresses to the recycling facilities is a huge friction point. what to do with the materials extruded from the mattresses is a huge friction point. I mean, if it's a spring mattress, the steel component, that's easy. But really, everything else, I mean, there's a few other components that are more readily reused. But the foam, which is the vast majority of the online mattresses, right? A lot of them are all foam. That's probably one of the harder things to know what to do with. There's only a certain number of uses for that today. So there's a more of a systemic problem of creating, how do you create more applications for recycled foam? That's not something easy to solve per se. That takes kind of lots of companies innovating and doing things. I mean, there's just like a systemic type of change that needs to happen for that. So recycling's not going to get us there, even if we had recycling in every state, which even that would take probably decades, given how far we've come so far in just getting to only 3 states with recycling programs. So recycling is not going to get us there entirely in terms of addressing this problem. It helps. But
there's also a cost to recycling, right?
That's true.
So you have to build that infrastructure. You have to run whatever plant is going to do it. So just that it's wonderful. We need recycling, but the concept of, it's okay if we have recycling doesn't make any sense.
Right. And even in a perfect world where you had recycling centers everywhere, there was no friction in getting your mattress to a recycling center, and all of the materials in the mattress could be recycled. Even in that perfect scenario, which is so far from where we are now, it's still better to just not have made the mattress than to have to recycle it and reuse it.
Clearly, we need recycling, and I'm a huge fan of recycling, but it's not fair to expect recycling to be able to solve the whole problem.
Correct.
And sometimes I think consumers, they feel that way. Like the problem just goes away if I recycle.
Exactly.
That's not the case.
And so end of life was already an issue for this reason, and it's only increasing as an issue as we see mattress lifespans shortening. That's a huge drive. That's kind of the key driver of that particular issue, like end of life, is how long are people keeping these? So if they used to keep a mattress at least 10 years, maybe 12, and now they're keeping them 5 to 7, well, that's already twice as many mattresses per year ending up in landfills effectively. So if that continues to shorten, which as we've talked about in previous episodes, we talked about the ultra cheap mattress issue and people being a segment of consumers being trained to think of mattresses as a disposable product. Well, shit, that really increases that turnover and therefore the number of mattresses ending up in landfills. But on top of that, there's a multiplier effect here, which is that if we also are adding a return policy-based multiple every time someone makes a choice, every time someone buys a new mattress and replaces their mattress, then basically, let's say we had doubled in the past few years because of people keeping their mattresses less time. Well, if now 20% of people return their mattress every time they change mattresses, well, that adds 20% to that already higher number. We've already doubled it, and now we add 20% to the doubled number. So it's a huge compounding issue here that we can really do something about, I think, as an industry. And I guess where I'm going with this is that the case for change is, to me, that I don't see a scenario where at some point people don't wake up to this. You know, with the growing consciousness of global warming and the growing measurable, visible impact of global warming and of just environmental consciousness, our collective consciousness as it relates to the environment and our responsibilities, as that continues to grow, I just don't see a scenario where at some point this doesn't just become a stain on the mattress industry.
Yeah.
Like where people just go, what the hell? Why is this happening?
Right. And what you hit on so far is the issue of the volume of mattresses that are hitting end of life. There's also the aspect of what environmental impact went into making those in the first place. So all of that foam that we're trying to recycle is also a petroleum-based product.
That's right.
So it's even
the
worse.
carbon footprint of
You know,
these things is not low, and they've been transported, and sometimes across an entire ocean, but certainly in every case they're transported regionally.
Right. And so it's whatever fossil fuel went into the foam itself, and then whatever the emissions are, and the cheaper the foam tends to correlate with the more pollution from the plant from which that foam was made, from which that mattress came. So it's just, and as we talked about ultra cheap mattresses and prices going down and lifetime going down, you're just creating more and more volume that has multiple ways that it's bad for the environment.
And not to mention that, you know, to the extent that mattresses that are using more chemicals in their manufacturing are the ones ending up in landfills, that's even worse too. That's because that's just leaching more stuff into the environment as they slowly decompose over thousands of years or what have you. So that's bottom line. What we wanted to cover here is our belief that there needs to be some deep thinking for the industry, and I kind of equate this to the warranty question that the industry wrestled with for many years, and I think kind of ultimately came to some collective change on a few years back. I mean, I don't know how it hasn't necessarily taken hold across the entire industry, but there was some collective change a few years back on the idea of warranties. Why are we offering 25-year warranties on everything we make? Why are we setting consumers' expectations that a mattress should last 25 years and then telling them that you should keep your mattress for 5 to 7 years? But there was a question of, the reason I equate it to that is because inevitably, if you're going to make a change to this, it's going to be kind of a game of chicken a little bit, right? Like who's going to move first? Because otherwise, if only one person moves, everyone else could pounce on that, and then it becomes sort of a prisoner's dilemma type of thing where you can't get anybody to do the right thing. So so everyone does the wrong thing, and that's the worst case outcome for everyone. But if only one person does the right thing, that's terrible for them. So warranties were sort of similar in that regard because they were being used as a marketing tool. And so it was the kind of thing where everyone sort of agreed, yeah, in a perfect world, we would shorten these things a lot, especially on cheaper products that we really don't build to last, even more than 5 years. So, but who's gonna blink first? Who's gonna do that? And how can we feel confident that others will follow suit and commit to it? And so it required kind of the industry collectively making a decision. And I think that return policy is a tricky type of issue that, short of some, regulation coming in, I think it may require something like that. So we're going to leave that for our next episode, where we're going to talk about some ideas we have on that front. But I think that the point of this conversation here today was really just to make the case for why we think that that discussion should happen. And that probably now's the time to start thinking about that and discussing it.
Yeah, I don't know if it makes sense to cover now or in the next topic, but if you think about it, it makes sense that the consumer hasn't internalized this problem. And that's because the same reason we talk about it doesn't make sense to do a TV ad because you're paying for 100 people to see the ad, but only one of them's in market. So likewise, only one person out of 100 is kind of thinking about a mattress at any time. So it's not a product that we're making transactions with every day. So I'm not thinking about recycling of it because I'm not consuming it in my mind all the time. It's just every 8 years or whatever. Versus if it's the soda or beer cans, you have them all the time, and so it's a constant reminder, every day. Oh, I should recycle this. Oh, I should recycle this. But a mattress is not like that. So the majority of the population isn't thinking about it at any given time. So it kind of makes sense. But I think that's more reason that it's incumbent on us to try to do something here.
Well, but you highlight the challenge of using the media here, because that's the media. I do think needs to be part of telling this story to consumers, and I think from the standpoint of averting the potential stain on the industry that I talked about, I think someone from the media focusing on this is likely to be a catalyst for that. But likewise, from the standpoint of creating this collective movement and coordinated change, I think using the media as a tool to educate consumers as that's happening will be an important part of the strategy. But in both cases, your point about the fact that this is not something the average consumer is thinking about on a daily basis does a little bit highlight the challenge there, because it's how do you make this story seem pertinent to people who are not focused on this product right now. But nonetheless, so there's certainly things that the industry can do, because getting people to think about this at the point they are making their purchase is important. That's something that, so from the standpoint of Goodbed, we definitely think that we can help with this issue. And one of the ways is, of course, by calling out bad behavior when we see it, as I talked about earlier, but also just discouraging bad behavior. And one of the, I had intended to touch on this earlier, but when we talked about abuse, knowing abuse about like trying to be a serial returner, that's one thing. And the next level down from that is abuse has more good intent, but you're buying several with the intention of keeping one. That's still abuse. But there's even a more subtle form of abuse that's much, much, much more pervasive. And that is the person who just sort of blows off their research process because they're going to lean on the fact that they can always return it if they don't like it. They just say, my friend has this one. They said it's good. To hell with it. I don't feel like researching. I'm just going to go buy this. If I don't like it, I can always return it. That's also abuse. And that type of abuse is super prevalent. So that's the type of thing that we really feel like just our entire business model is designed to help solve and help improve. Because obviously our whole business is about helping people choose the right mattress for them the first time. So everything about what we do supports that.
On the surface, it could look to a seller of that mattress, it's actually good what you just described, because this person wasn't going to buy otherwise, but now because we made it easy, they bought. The reality is you have to look at what's the expected lifetime value of that person, and those are the people who are way more likely to return. So they're way more expensive, so to speak, if you look at that group in aggregate.
That's right.
So it's in the brand's best interest to also make sure that they're selling to as many people for whom the bed is going to be. That's right.
Well, because obviously their overall economics are the summation of all of their customers. But on any given customer, if a customer goes and buys a mattress from them and then returns it, and then goes and buys a mattress from somebody else, well, they lost money. They clearly lost a significant amount of money on that customer. Not only did they pay money to acquire that customer, they also paid money to ship that customer a mattress that they didn't recoup at all.
And they made the mattress. They paid for the mattress.
They didn't just pay to ship it to them. They paid to make it, obviously. But so they actually lost a lot of money on that customer, and so getting more of those types of customers is an unprofitable proposition for sure. And so again, we do think that I think the point I was trying to make in response to what you had said earlier was just that we as Goodbed, I think we have a lot of things that we try to do to help here. But we also feel like maybe there's a way we can play a little bit of a thought leadership role and be kind of a Sweden. Hey, wearing my Sweden flag shirt here as a proud Swedish American. But if we can be kind of Sweden here, we might be able to help the industry collectively move towards something that is a more sustainable solution. So that's the kind of a tease to the next episode.
Cool. Well, why don't we wrap it there? And I'm also chomping at the bit to hear what happened with your investment that you got blocked out of by Kleiner Perkins and Sequoia?
So where we left that story off, if you haven't listened to the previous episodes, you should go back and hear about my journey in podcasting, which began in 2003, 2004, before the term podcasting had ever even been coined. It led me to ultimately be kind of in the mix with all the early frontiersmen and women of the podcasting space, the pioneers, if you will, back in the 04, 05 timeframe, and ultimately had a term sheet to fund a business of what was at the time the most kind of prominent group in the podcasting space, which was led by Adam Curry, who was a former MTV VJ. And so I'd been working with him and his business partner, signed a term sheet, only to discover on a spring break that I took like with my kids the following week that he then promptly flew to San Francisco, met with Kleiner Perkins and Sequoia, received a term sheet from them all while I'm on spring break that was better terms than I had offered him and that he had signed up for. And come back, and all this happens kind of while I'm not in a position to really do anything about it. So by the time I get back, my partners had decided, okay, well, there's not really all that much we can do here. So we ultimately kind of just walked away gracefully from that situation. But, I followed the company in, I guess for those who were interested in how that played out, because you'd wondered.
Yeah, that's what I wanted.
They didn't do well. They stuck around for a few years, but they went down the wrong path, in my opinion. They went down the path of trying to just create a bunch of content, and it was too early for that at the time. I didn't believe that was the right approach. That's not the approach that we had signed up to fund, and this maybe was part of why ultimately he went with them as well. I believed that in the early days you needed to be building tools. It's kind of like in the gold rush analogy, like the early days, it's like you got to be selling the Levi's jeans and the pickaxes. You're not, selling the ultimate product here, the content. It was just, there wasn't enough of an ecosystem for monetizing that content yet to be out investing money in creating content. You needed that content to just be made on the cheap by kind of more organically and so forth. And then you be the pickaxe kind of arms dealer that's creating the tools for them to support that work and then ultimately monetize that work. So the ad network and everything like that. That's what I was hoping to back. That's not what they ended up doing. They went down the wrong path. I don't think they had the kind of media mindset that you needed to have to really kind of have the right strategy there. But, that was sort of cold comfort because I really wanted to be part of it and I really wanted to help them grow. And then the other coda to that story, by the way, is that maybe a year or two after that all went down, I bumped into Adam at a conference. He's super tall. He's like, I want to say like 6'4", 6'5". So he's easy to spot from across the room, and he had a crowd of people around him. He's signing autographs and stuff like that. And I just walked up, and he saw me like coming even, and I just walked up to the crowd, and he just like stopped what he was doing, and he goes, "Hey, that was just business, right?" And I just walked away. So that's how that story ended. That was the last time I saw Adam Curry.
Well, maybe he's listening now. He's probably a big fan of Mattress podcast. But question: if that deal had gone through, and you would have been heavily involved in the company, or as involved as you guys and your firm would get, do you think you would have started Goodbed?
Gosh, that's really hard to say. I mean, the genesis of me starting Goodbed did come out of a similar, as you kind of teased at one point earlier in this season, did come out of a similar proactive investment thesis that I had. So it was something I was also kind of pursuing proactively alongside of my interest in what ultimately became podcasting. But I was looking at companies that were doing much like what we do in various product categories. And along the way, I bought a mattress, discovered that that was a category that desperately needed something like this. Kind of had that quintessentially bad shopping experience, all that. So it's hard to say because I was not intending to join up with them. I was still intending to remain an investor.
No, but you were emotionally invested. I mean, it had been your idea, your thesis. You had pursued it. It was
that wasn't the only investment we did that was like that, though. I mean, there were other investments we did that I spearheaded and was emotionally invested in, and they didn't become something I leapt into full time. It's possible this one would have been more alluring in that way than others, but those certainly didn't stop me from doing good bed. And so it was ultimately the fact that no one was doing this that led me to jump into this. It was the void.
Right. Yeah. Well, we'll get to that more later. I was just curious if, like, the rest of the mattress industry, if we actually should say thanks, Adam Curry, because you doing that ultimately gave the mattress industry mags. And the mattress industry.
Well, I think
what so.
I don't think that anyone's out there writing thank you notes to Adam Curry for that. But but I think that if there is anything to be thanked for that, it's the fact that no one was doing it. Because if someone had been doing it, my mindset would have been to back them as an investor. It was the fact that no one was doing it that made me feel compelled to actually start it myself. So. That was my intention from the beginning. I'm going to look for somebody who I can invest in to do this in the mattress category, for that matter, in lots of other categories that I had identified. But again, there wasn't anyone. So that's what we have to thank for this, and certainly my wife is super grateful of that. She's writing Adam Curry all kinds of thank you letters / hate mail.
Rachel, she really is a trooper. I give her credit.
So anyway, we'll leave that story there. That's really kind of is the closure on that tale. But it just to come full circle, it is super fun for me to. I mean, I was a member of the New York City Podcasting Association starting in I think 2005, and there was at the time like 7 of us.
There's as many members as there are.
It was
listeners.
a meetup, and there were like 7 of us, and it was just like we met in someone's office, and it was like nothing. If I went out to dinner after one of those, I'd say, I just came from this New York City podcasting meetup. They were like, what did you, what? No one had any idea what podcasting was. And by the way, it took a long time for podcasting. That's the other thing that kind of, if I would look back on that experience, it took a hell of a long time for podcasting to come into its own. Much longer than I expected. I thought for sure when the iPhone came out, I was like, oh man, like now it's really going to explode. And it took another probably 8-9 years before it really had serious traction, and another like at least 10 if not 11 years before there was serious exits being seen, in terms of acquisitions and so forth. So it was a long time coming. I was ahead of the curve, as I was with Good Bed. as history has clearly witnessed, and again as my wife can clearly attest to, so to continue to reference that. But nonetheless, in both cases, I think that the initial vision has proven to be on point, and the need has been there in both cases. So that's one of the reasons that I remain so convicted about what we do, is because I know that there is a desperate need for this, and so it's just a matter of continuing to help people. Help get the word out about what we're doing, and help people understand what our intentions are, what our motivations are, that we are here to help good companies succeed in this industry, and we really believe we can do that alongside helping consumers make the best choice. And we've thought a lot about how to strike that balance, and we know how to do it. So I remain as convicted as ever in that mission. So Is that the right
Good.
word? Use of the term? Convicted? I remain convicted?
Well, these days, convicted has a different connotation. So hopefully you're not going to be convicted about anything. But we know what you mean. You have a lot of conviction and belief.
Yeah.
And enthusiasm about what we're doing.
No doubt.
And rightfully so. All right, let's wrap.
All right, there we go.
We're already well past snack size.
I hope you enjoyed this all-you-can-eat buffet. We'll be back with our solutions to the return problem next week. If you like what you're hearing, remember to subscribe on whatever podcast platform you use and leave us a review. It helps other people discover the podcast. In the meantime, we're out.